Hello, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to the Prince George's County Memorial Library System's Career Chat. Today, I have my special guest, Ms. Kylie Patterson, the Director of Economic Inclusion at Johns Hopkins. And I'm going to allow her to introduce herself to you all, and we will move forward with this career chat. So, Ms. Patterson.
All right, well, thank you, and hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here and talk with you all. So as was mentioned, I'm the Director of Economic Inclusion at Johns Hopkins. What that means is I work at Johns Hopkins University and Health System to identify ways for people who are from Baltimore City and from the other areas to work at Johns Hopkins. So primarily focusing on people who live in Baltimore City and people who are of color. So these are African-American people primarily who are trying to make sure are able to be employed at Johns Hopkins. And then I also work on buying from small businesses in Baltimore City and the state that are either, again, in the city or that are minority owned in the state. And so over the course of my tenure there, we've hired 1,400 additional people. We hired 500 plus people with criminal records. And we have increased our spending with local vendors by about $55 million. So this is exciting work, and the reason why we do it is that we know that local economies matter a lot, and by focusing on people of color in particular, we're able to really make sure that we change the economic trajectory of our community.
That is great. That is great. I don't know if they informed you a little bit of what I do here at the library system is workforce development related. So this is great. I'm glad that I'm having this conversation with you. And this is, kind of like a trading of ideas and such. So my first question for you would be, what was your journey from high school to where you are now? And was it exactly how you expected it to be, or was there kind of like some changes?
Yeah, I would definitely say it was not a straight route. So I went to high school and I was I was a bit of a geek. I can say it. I was a geek. And so I did like mock trial, I did scholastic scrimmage, I did math counts. And I even went for the track and field team. The only reason why I was on the track team was that they didn't cut because I was that bad at sports. But I managed to stay on the track and field team. So I did that. And then it came time for me to go to school. And I wanted to go to a big school where there was just going to be a lot of diversity, a lot of opportunities. I went to Temple University in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And I absolutely loved Temple. And it was great because a lot of times when you go to school, it's hard to find internships, for whatever reason. But when you go to school in a big city like Philadelphia, there are always opportunities to do something and work for people. So I did that. And I did a lot of campaign work. So I worked for different campaigns. I worked for the youngest African-American elected representative at that time. And then also got to take really cool classes with the former mayor of Philadelphia, was one of my professors. So after all that, I definitely thought I would be a politician. And I ran for student body president at Temple and won that. And so I was feeling myself. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. But just because you're student body president, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to hire you. And so I was lucky enough, though, to find employment. This was in 2010. And I found a job at the Pew Charitable Trust. And I did research analysis. And what I learned was that I was a people person. But the role required that I spent a lot of time looking at numbers. And it was just really challenging. And this is why, mentors are so important. I had the fortune of having a mentor while I was working at Pew, and she could tell how miserable I was. And she encouraged me to do two things. One, she encouraged me to root out what are those things that I really care most about. And while I like politics, what I really care about is economic development and making sure everyone has a choice when it comes to their economic lifestyle. And then I wanted to be in charge. And basically I was told, you don't have the education or the experience to be in charge. So she said, well, why don't you go to school for a master's program and see what happens, and learn, and learn kind of what it takes to to run research programs and to run programmatic programs. So I went to the University of Minnesota, and I think there's a lot of value in going places that you are that you're not familiar with. I certainly, as a Black woman from the East Coast, I didn't, Minnesota was as far away to me as Mars. But it was great because I got to learn a lot. I got to meet a lot of great people. And again, I had a great opportunity to do a lot of internships in community. And by the time I had finished, I had worked on all sorts of huge projects, multi-million-dollar projects, doing historic preservation of a library and new market tax credits. I had gotten to manage a summer employment program similar to what's probably exists in Prince George's and elsewhere. So I managed that for 2 years, and I'm doing a return on investment study. I did fundraising events, fundraised over $40,000. And so it was a wonderful experience, but also sometimes when you choose a career or a job, you have to also think about your family. And so while I was at grad school, my father passed, and my mom was like, you are far from home. I really would prefer you to come closer to home. And so, Zachary, I'm so happy to be talking with you because I hope I'm dropping gems that you can repeat to your students later. But one of the other things that comes up when you go to school is so important to maintain that network of classmates. So one of my classmates was working in New Jersey at a consulting firm, and I was telling her about my desire to move back east, and she said, "Oh, well, they're looking for a consultant at my firm. You should apply and see what happens, and I'll put in a good word for you." And next thing you know, I was working at a consulting firm at BCT Partners in Newark, New Jersey, and it's a Black-owned management consulting firm. Randall Pinkett, who was, I think, season 3 winner of The Apprentice, and a Rhodes Scholar, and just a brilliant Black man, is the CEO and founder. And so I had the fortune of sitting under him and being mentored by him and being able to do a lot of interesting work. I traveled across the United States doing consulting. And it was paid for, right? But I just did a lot of hard work and managed to manage programs that were in the millions of dollars, do major consulting projects with National Institutes of Health, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Health and Human Services. And so you would imagine how tired I was after doing that for a bit. And,
you're speaking about it, all the moves you're making.
Yeah, lots of moves. And so, but throughout all this, I kept on, what was amazing is I started to see a through line. There was something that connected everything. And I was always focusing on fiscal and economic policy, and in particular, looking at ways to support people of color. So when I was living in Minneapolis and I was doing the work with summer internships, most of my interns were, students of color. And that was on purpose, right? To not only give people opportunity to work, but also give people an opportunity to expand their social network, because we know that networks is so often how people get jobs these days. And so then working for the consulting firm, I actually consulted small businesses for my time there. And that was part of the reason why I was traveling so extensively across the United States. So I say all that to say, an opportunity came available at what used to be called the Corporation for Enterprise Development. Now it's called Prosperity Now. And they were starting up a team called the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative. And their whole focus was, we need to understand there's a wealth gap in America. We know that. But in particular, there's a deeper racial wealth divide when you look at people of color, primarily African-American and Latinos, in comparison to their white peers. So our work was really looking at how do we work in communities, with communities, to change that reality. So I worked across, again, many cities, and in particular, I stood up programming in Chicago and Baltimore, and did work in Miami and New Orleans. And so it was wonderful.
You've been in some nice locations.
They've been some great locations. Very warm, yes. But no, great locations. Or cold. But it was great work, because what we did was we worked with nonprofits that were doing, housing support, small business support, workforce development. And what we did was we said, okay, what do we have to do to make you a stronger nonprofit. We'll provide the capacity building, sure, but we also make sure we provided support around how to do policy work, how to advocate for your organization and for your community, how to, and then we also made space and kind of roundtables for networking so that these nonprofits would be able to network with people who are of higher wealth backgrounds. Because one of the things that we know is that, you know, when you have a community of people who have lower wealth, that means that the organizations that are in those communities have lower wealth, right? So trying to make sure that we adjust that, because then, you know, when you have less resources, you're just not able to serve as many people. So that was that was a major project. And so I was loving that. And again, you can't, you have to be so careful when you're going out and about, because you never know who you're talking to. So I wrote a report on Baltimore, on the racial wealth divide there in Baltimore City. And I came in and I was talking to people at Johns Hopkins University. And I was sharing with them, you know, their role and what they can do as an anchor to address the racial wealth divide in Baltimore. And I'm telling everything they need to do, like left, right, you know, I'm giving all the directions. And turns out that that was the senior vice president of the university. I didn't, you know, you were
just speaking your piece.
I was just speaking my piece, you know, and it's interesting, right? Because most times you know the presidents, right, of organizations, but you never know, very, very rarely do you know that second person or that third person behind the president, which is my case. So I was like, nice to meet you, you know. But he gave me his card, and then I discovered his title. And we also had other items in common. I was a Truman Scholar when I was in undergrad, and he was a Truman Scholar about 22 years ago. And so we had that connection. So I reached out to him, and initially, my only interest was to have an informational interview. I wanted to understand how had he gotten to that role, and I reached out to him with that question. And I think part of the reason why he ended up, you know, offering me this role, offering me to apply for the role, was that it had to follow through. You know, I met him, I took his card, and I said, I will follow up and have an information interview with you. And I did just that. And I get on the call, and he tells me about, you know, it takes about 5 minutes to tell me about his story. And then the rest of the 25 minutes, he's selling me on this role and encouraging me to apply. So that's how I found myself to today. Zachary, I know I went way longer than you.
Oh, no. You actually have covered some of my follow-up questions with that, which is great. So, you know, and that's seems like a very, very, you know, long journey, but it seems at the same time, it seems like each step was revealing more to yourself, you know, who and where you wanted to be. So
absolutely. And I think one of the things too that's interesting is that I came to realize as well in terms of just how strong your network is, and how you know, truly you have to believe in yourself and your ability to learn anything. And you know, especially as a consultant, you are often given projects and to work on things where really it's all about your soft skills and not about your hard skills. You know, it's all about your problem solving, your integrity, your energy, you know, your belief really in yourself and in others. And that really is what makes the difference.
Yes, indeed.
Be a successful consultant and employee. Because, you know, those hard skills, they can be learned. And especially these days with LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning and all the other free courseworks and YouTube for that matter. But I think the key is that too often people of color and women, when they see a job description, for instance, they say, okay, if I don't have all 5 of the things that they're asking for, I'm not going to apply. But in fact, you know, that's even more reason for you to apply, because most people who are looking at this job description don't have all 5. And what's more is that if, you know, I would say if the real challenge for you is around the hard skills, not the soft skills, you know, just ask yourself, okay, can I teach myself these hard skills? Like, what does it take? Set a plan. You know, when I first started working as a consultant, one of my assignments was to do e-learning for the Center for Unemployment Insurance Integrity. And, you know, I'm not an e-learning specialist. I've taken courses online, sure, but that was not my background. So I took some time. I set a plan to learn as quickly as possible. As a consultant, you have to do that too. Time is money. But I set a plan, and I said, okay, who are the experts? Can I reach out to them? Can I have information interviews with them? And you'd be surprised. A lot of times, people who are experts in e-learning have a lot of time on their hands. Then I went, of course, and found resources, found books to read at my local library and elsewhere. And that next, in that month's time, I became an expert on e-learning. I could go through the pedagogy, I could go through how to engage, how to ensure that the students are paying attention and are actually engaged in the material. And more than that, I was able to successfully deliver the project and really demonstrate that, we were an organization, a learning organization that can really, service any organization out there. So I think that that's something to think about too in terms of this career trajectory, is understanding that, you could go to school for the rest of your life and never learn.
Yes.
You have to, uncover what you need to know, for that particular role or for that particular career, and then just keep on pushing forward.
Yeah, and hearing you talk about that is kind of like how I got into workforce development. It kind of was an initiative that the library system wanted to do, and it kind of fell into my lap. And then from there, I kind of started, networking and seeing what kind of opportunities were available in the community through organizations. And I ended up being in the library, I have a lot of people that come in. And, I started asking questions, and I started collecting cards, and I started seeing a trend of people who are offering training, whether it was, interview etiquette or clothing or, basic computer skills. And then you started seeing the need. And then what I did is I, kind of strategized and, kind of polled the public and see what they wanted, in regards if they wanted, career readiness and things of that nature. And that's where I started developing programming around that. So I can totally understand, like, it's kind of like, it's more than one way to get to the post office. So it's like you kind of start one place and it takes you all the way left. But when you get to the end of that part, it's like it brings you right back to the other side. So it's really great to be able to, take that time and develop things. And I'll always tell, like, the customers that I deal with, I was like, if you've gone to college or if you've been around people, you develop these soft skills, adaptability, teamwork, being able to communicate, things of that nature. And those are what, even now with the pandemic and everything moving forward, I think those are going to be some of the most critical skills to have, because it's not that whole being able to walk up to somebody and sell yourself like right there on the spot. It's going to be like, how can I convey this, and learning ways to convey these skills virtually. So
yep. Oh, absolutely. And I think too, to your point around like what's happening now in the pandemic, I think you have the opportunity to take advantage of people's free time. And I don't mean that in like a, respectfully, of course.
Yes.
But if you've always wanted, let's just say, I think one of the things people often say to themselves is, I don't want to reach out to this person because, what if they're busy, or, I don't want to bother them. But I would say, you shouldn't make that decision on behalf of someone else. Let them make that decision. You can reach out and not hear back. Yeah. But if you never reach out, you will never hear back.
Yep.
And you'll be surprised, some of these random, and this is just an example, but just the other day I went on LinkedIn. I saw someone posted something that was interesting to me. I commented back and I said, this is interesting. I said, I would love to learn, why did you post this? Tell me more. And then this person said, oh, I would love to talk to you, about this project. And then of course we get on the phone, we start talking about the project, but then she tells me about her career, and she tells me about, organizations she thinks I should join. She tells me about classes she thinks I should join. And then she invited me to one of her classes that she'll be hosting in a couple of weeks. Now that was just a random moment online, but being able to do the follow through, seeing, because how often do you see something, you're like, oh, that's interesting, and then you just move ahead. But actually taking the time, doing a little typing, following up, and it can turn into something that's really valuable and helping your growth and your networking.
And I always want to encourage people to reach out, because like I said, even though things are shut down, you got to remember that some of these people work in HR departments and they have a job. So they have to do their job. So I I always tell people, apply, apply, apply. It's this is the time where, people are taking that time to, go through your application and look at something that maybe before, when they were in the midst of having a schedule, 8 to 5 or whatever, I got to meet this amount of applications to look at before I can get up out of here. And, say kind of those things. And now it's like a great time for you to not only sharpen yourself, but, move forward in a way that you want to move in your career, because you have the time to build yourself in that way.
Absolutely. And I think, well, finally, what I would say is too, in terms of that, like, I think sometimes people, I think another opportunity is to name yourself and to retitle yourself. So, Zachary, you talked about when you first started, right? And how you were like, I wonder if you would have called yourself a workforce development professional, right? I don't know if you would have said that then or not, but like certainly now.
Yes,
like,
now I would call myself a specialist now.
There we are, right? And and so you don't necessarily need someone else to tell you that, I'm saying, like, you can name it for yourself. And I think that that's an important part too, is like, of course you shouldn't just, if you're not a medical doctor, don't call yourself a medical doctor. But what I'm saying is that if you are, let's say you build up a rich knowledge of something, let's say you, like, I think a great example is like people have interest in cars, for instance. There are people certainly who are mechanics who have gone through and gotten certifications and who are mechanics. But if you spend enough time, listening to car podcasts, reading books about cars, tinkering on your own car, right? You're not a novice. No, you are probably advanced in terms of your car knowledge. So, carry that, like name that too. Like, don't kind of like downplay it, because you actually do have more knowledge than most. And that, and that's I think the key part here is, because I see so many, I don't know your full audience who will be seeing this, but I think I see a lot of adults and I see a lot of youth. This, over my entire career doing workforce development as well. And so often, there was this like, well, they're asking for someone who has 8 years of work experience in X, Y, and Z. And I would share with them, okay, so there's like the paid for work experience, but there's volunteer work experience. Like there is work that, that you do that is valuable, that conveyed skill, that gave you experience, that you should also consider, when you're putting together your applications. And I mean, of course, I just think that there's a lot to it, I guess is my point. It's just, I think, because you do so much in volunteering, you do so much in your free time, your hobbies, and they all matter. They all add to who you are as a complete applicant and a complete employee. And it's a question around how do you bring that into your documents, into your applications to show that.
Yeah, and it's even now, like, like with everything going on, I've been able, with just my hobbies and my interests, there's other people that have gained access to my hobbies and interests, and they want to know. And I've been, like my cousin, I've been teaching him some things, and my brother, and it's just different things that with your personal interests, you'd be surprised. Like, I mean, I probably am assuming that there's probably a lot of people that learned how to sew during this time, or just little odd little hobbies that you might have not have thought were valuable to you, but you gain the knowledge, and now you're saying like, oh, this can translate into so many different things. So
right, and there's value. Someone, because the thing is that you've spent the time, you've grown expertise. Someone else doesn't have the time to do the same, and that's fundamentally what that's how you create value, right? So
steel sharpens steel.
Most definitely, most definitely.
So you made a point about the teenagers that might be looking at this, or the youth. Do you have any good points of advice? I know you said something about networking, but also is there anything else that you want to add that you would, offer the teen crowd or the youth crowd as to getting into a career field, or in particular your career field?
So I would have 3 pieces of advice. My first piece of advice is let others tell you no. You don't tell yourself no. And so, go for it. I think, like, for instance, if you want to start a small business and someone tells you no, don't, what I mean? Like, I think it's so important for you to recognize too that people come to you with their own baggage and their own history. So you have to kind of navigate and understand people's perspective, but understand that no one can live your life but you, in terms of, you want to listen to wisdom, but you also want to be able to learn and trust your intuition, and ask yourself, okay, is this a right thing to do? In 5 years, will I regret doing this? Those are the types of questions you want to ask yourself. Because I look back on some of the things that I didn't do in high school. Because I would say things like, well, my friend said that's not cool, or frankly, like, what's the payoff? You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't understand the payoff, so I just didn't do it. And I look back on it and I'm like, well, those were missed opportunities. And I would say the other thing I would say is take all the opportunities. This is a 35-minute whatever conversation, and really ask yourself every time you're sitting down anywhere, ask yourself, how can I learn from this? You can learn from talking to somebody at the Quickie Mart. You can learn by listening to these videos. You can learn by just sitting outside and looking at the trees. And I know it sounds so like, so flowery, but it's true. You have to take the time to learn from all these experiences because they will prove valuable one day. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I would say in terms of my work, and if you wanted to get into economic development, which I think you should, I think in particular, if you are a youth of color, there are not many people of color who work in economic development. And let me define what economic development means, right? It means buying things, it means hiring people, and it means building things, right? So that's fundamentally what it is. But these are big investments that change communities and change lives. And so what would it look like if you could say, if you become a leader one day and you say, you know what, Prince George's, we're going to build a new library. That's economic development. You say, we're going to improve Metro. Mm-hmm. That's economic development. And so I think it's important for us to understand the definition of what economic development is and understand the opportunities and pursue them with all of our energy, because right now, the industry of economic development is very much older white men. And I think if we really want to have a more equitable future, we need to have people of color and women at those tables too.
Indeed. So your work seems like a blend of the economics and small business, workforce development, little sprinkle of social work in there.
Yeah.
Could you like compare and contrast that to any other job you have, or does it seem like it's like a piece of every job that you've had that you brought into what you're doing now?
I guess I could compare it to a job I had with a nonprofit in Minneapolis, because I was doing youth development work. And I was working with some gang affiliated youth on getting jobs. And what was cool is that we were working with them on getting jobs, but also entrepreneurship training. So we were training them, like these young men were entrepreneurs already. It's just that they didn't have the outlet for those energies, right? So we were able to sit with them, work with them on developing ventures. And meanwhile, I was also working on doing the real estate development project with the New Markets tax credits and the historic preservation. So that was a cool job because I got to do all of that. Then I got to do fundraising and PR and marketing. Randall Pinkett, who I shared with you, who was he continues to be my mentor. He always said that when you work and when you advance your career, you have to always remember that there's two things you have to accomplish. You have to do the work. You have to do a good job. You have to do your best, and you have to show the work. So the show means you could be the smartest person in the room, but you got to show up like you're the smartest person in the room, right? You have to sit up straight. You have to, wear the collared shirt. Show might mean that you need to write a report on something and then post it on your LinkedIn or your Facebook. You always have to keep in mind those those dueling activities, because both of them you have to do if you want to advance your career. People have to know that you've done good work, and you have to do the good work.
Okay. So now with everything it seems like your job is more person to person or directly dealing with people. How has this pandemic changed how you go about your work?
Mm-hmm. I mean, everything's on the computer. I mean, other than that, I mean, it hasn't affected my work too much, but it's been a lot more computer work, a lot more video work, call work. I think, but I will say too, there's nothing like meeting a person in person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been fine. I think the biggest thing though, I would say in terms of like, you said it earlier, that HR officials have more time now, because oftentimes there are fewer requisitions or roles being filled. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's something that's been a different element of this, is that the volume is lower. And so people are taking a lot more time to like get through. People are taking a lot more time to hire. People are taking a lot more time to buy things. So I would say the speed of the work, while like the nature of the work hasn't changed, right? It's still a lot of work. It's still changing behaviors, changing minds. But the speed of it has changed in that it's fast but slow. You do all the work, but then there's a slowdown on the back end because people are trying to, keep track of their finances.
Okay. And you had made a previous mention in regards to teens about, volunteering opportunities. Is there any resources or volunteer opportunities that you would specifically recommend for kids or youth or just anybody looking to kind of gain some access to a part of your field or within your field?
Yeah, well, I would say, of course, seeking out internships would be a great first step. But I would also, I would challenge anyone who's listening to this to think of 3 people you admire or 3 organizations you admire, and reach out to someone who works there and ask them how you can volunteer for them. And I would, and just do it and see what happens. I mean, that would be my challenge, is because the volunteering opportunities, you can volunteer, you can volunteer at many places. But if you want to volunteer to advance your career, you want to make sure that you are intentional about where you volunteer. And so therefore I would say focus on those things or those places where you want to work one day, or in those industries you want to work one day, and figure out how you can volunteer your services there. And I think what's really cool about being a young person today is that many organizations want to hear from a young person. A volunteer, you might say, I would like to volunteer and be on your youth council, or I want to be a youth voice for your business or for your organization. Let me tell you guys, they will fall over themselves. They're like, oh my goodness, like we have this young person who's interested. And what's more is you'll get the benefit of that network. All those adults in that room who likely have jobs are going to know your name and get to know you as a person. And that is a great way of getting yourself in line for employment.
Yeah, and to follow up with you, I feel like that's also it's a great position to be in the sense of as a youth, you're gaining all the history and prior knowledge of what's been going on in the company, and now you're bringing your own little twist to it, or how you see where the company could go in the future. So it's a great place to be in if you're a youth. I definitely can agree with that.
And your perspective is valuable. We want your perspective, because the thing is too, is like, I think, going back to your work experience that matters and all of that, but your perspective matters. And people pay good money for just your perspective, and so and understanding that too, like, the youth of today are the customers of tomorrow. And that's the reason why businesses will want to know what you have to say and how you think we can improve things.
Most definitely. So, Ms. Kylie, I'm gonna get into some little off of the normal topic questions. So, are you an avid reader?
I am.
Okay, so Do you have any recommended titles for anybody that you have read either before the pandemic, during the pandemic, or are currently reading?
Absolutely. And it's so funny because my books are literally right here. So one of the books that I just finished reading that I really enjoyed is called The Master Plan.
Okay.
And it's by Chris Wilson. And he is now an artist here in Baltimore, but his story is just phenomenal. And essentially he might be from PG County. He might be, but he's based in Baltimore, and he had a troubled upbringing. He spent some time in the correction facility, but he set out a master plan to change his life, and he did. And now, he owns multiple homes. He's an artist. He's an author, and just a phenomenal read. And this is nonfiction.
Okay.
The other, another book I would throw out there would be, I'm actually really into sci-fi.
Okay.
And like post-apocalyptic sci-fi, because I told you guys earlier, I'm a geek. So Nicholas Sansbury Smith, that's his name. Nicholas Sansbury Smith is the author. And he has two series of books that I've really enjoyed. One is called Hell Divers, and the other is called Extinction Cycle. So those have been two of my I've just read them like 7 books, just ate them really, and they've been really fun to read. And I think one last book I would give you, if I can give you 3, would be a book by Frank Herbert called Dune. I really enjoy it. It's very political, and when you read it, it was interesting. You'll see a lot of what is talked about in the book in a fictional way, kind of happening in our today.
Okay. And still on the level of books, are there any books career-wise that you would recommend for somebody to, if they were looking to engage or gain knowledge into what you do or the particular aspects of what you do? Are there some good books, foundational books that maybe people could start to read and get some information in that sense?
Sure. Well, I actually like The Idiot's Guide to Office Politics. I think that's a good one.
Okay.
Another one would be, actually, I have it. It's called the gentle How to Brag. Basically, it tells you how to do that and how to brag on yourself. And then lastly, there's a book by an African-American author that talks more so around, how to be a Black person in the workforce or, in this space. And that is called How to Be by Harriet Cole. And so like I said, she doesn't just talk about work. She talks about all sorts of things. But I do think it's worthwhile having a book like that talks a bit about like the politics, the racial politics that can happen in the workforce, and how to overcome some of those challenges. But then also how to ground yourself in your African American, in particular, if you're African American, how to ground yourself in your history, and kind of be proud of yourself in the workforce. Because sometimes it can be alienating to operate in a very white economic space and being a Black person.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, Miss Kylie, I think do I have any more questions, or do you have any more? Do you have a question for me, perhaps?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, I have a question. This is so basic, but I always thought this was interesting. So I used to work in DC.
Mm-hmm.
I met a lot of folks who were from PG County, and I was told that I had to cuff my jeans.
Yes, indeed. Yes, it's a thing. We like to cuff our jeans a little bit at the bottom. It's a thing. Yes. I mean, now with the more like, tapered cut things going on and the slim fit and stuff like that, it's a lot less prevalent, but it's definitely a thing, and it's been a thing for a while in DC. The same, also New Balances, that the DC, the DMV, that's us. So
Got it.
So definitely.
And I'm curious too, in terms of like how is virtual, and like how has it been, for you moving into this virtual space, and how has
it's interesting in the sense that we already were offering, some things virtually, but on a smaller front, and now it's like kind of like rolling everything into virtual. So right now it's just really about like, converting things that you would normally do in a meeting room or in front of kids and stuff like, and converting it to a virtual platform. But from what I see, our system is doing it effortlessly, and I like what everything is coming out, and this is a great time for especially people in libraries, because I feel like a lot of people in libraries are creative, so they like to develop things, they like to build things. So it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel, it's just putting some new tires on the wheel, so
yeah.
So it's really cool to see all the things that my colleagues are coming up with, from yoga to meditation to story times. I do career quick tips, which are like, it's like a small, like 8 to 9 minute video, but it's giving you tips of how to sharpen your skills in regards to like interviewing or resumeing or anything of that nature. So I'm just trying to keep people motivated, keep them active, and keep them moving within workforce, and
Right.
just being mindful that we know that you can't go into an office and do the normal application process, but it's still happening, and you still can be part of it and be productive within it. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
That's,
Congratulations on keeping the ball rolling. No, this has been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this time, and I want to say thank you for the opportunity to share
I want to thank
a little
you,
bit of
Ms.
wisdom
Patterson.
I have to share with the viewers.
Well, it is great. Your wisdom is definitely needed. It's great to see an African American woman giving such positive information and doing such positive things within the community, and I applaud you. So continue doing what you're doing. I'm going to keep tabs on you, because you're in the backyard, so you're right there in Baltimore, so we know. So I'm definitely gonna be looking out for you. So and anytime, feel free, once we get things back open and going, come to the library and visit us. I'm at Largo Kettering, which is the same building that our administrative offices are located in. So yeah,
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so come and see us.
I come down there. I do come down there sometimes.
You come down the Beltway a little bit sometimes.
It's so bad. For my time in DC, I have all this money on my Metro card too, and I'm like I gotta spend my Smart Trip card. I'm like, I gotta spend this money.
Yeah, you gotta use that Smart Trip card. Use it or lose it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too, Kylie.
All right. Bye.
All right, bye.